The silence in the office was a living thing. It was a thick, heavy silence, woven from the scent of old leather, expensive whiskey, and the unspoken weight of power. For 3 weeks, Aaliyah had learned its textures, its moods. She moved through it on silent feet, a ghost in a crisp white apron, refilling a glass here, clearing a small plate there. She had been hired to be invisible, a functioning part of the decor in the penthouse suite of the formidable Mr. Tanaka. He was a man who seemed carved from granite and shadow, the kind of Japanese mafia boss whispered about in stories meant to frighten children and grown men alike. His presence filled the room even when he was still, his gaze sharp enough to feel like a physical touch. Aaliyah did her job, kept her head down, and collected the generous pay that was changing her life. She was good at being invisible, but for 3 weeks, her invisibility had been a lie. Because every time she entered the room, her eyes were drawn to the wall behind his great mahogany desk. There, among paintings of stark, beautiful landscapes, was a single photograph. A portrait. 2 men in dark suits, shaking hands, a cityscape gleaming through a window behind them. One man was Mr. Tanaka, younger, but just as severe. The other was her father. It was a ghost she saw every day, a memory hanging in a place it did not belong. Her father, who had died 4 years ago, had been a mechanic. A good man, a simple man, who smelled of grease and soap and always had a gentle smile just for her. What was he doing in a gold frame, shaking hands with one of the city's most dangerous men? The question had been a hot coal in her throat for days, burning her with its impossibility. Tonight, the silence felt different. A storm was brooding over the city, its gray light muting the opulent room. Mr. Tanaka had not looked up from his papers for an hour. Her shift was ending. It was now or never. She placed a fresh glass of water on his desk, her hand steady despite the frantic beating of her heart. He gave a slight, dismissive nod, without looking up. She didn't move. She waited until the silence stretched, until he finally lifted his dark eyes to hers, a flicker of irritation in their depths. She took a breath. "Sir," she said, her voice quiet but clear, unwavering. "I have a question," he said nothing, his stillness a command to continue. She raised her hand, not pointing, but gesturing softly toward the wall. "That portrait. The man with you. Why is my father in your office portrait?" Mr. Tanaka's face was a study in control, a mask of impassive authority he had perfected over a lifetime of navigating violence and betrayal. But at her question, for the barest fraction of a second, the mask slipped. It wasn't a gasp or a flinch, but something far more telling. A sudden, sharp stillness, a cessation of all the micro-movements of a living person. His eyes, which had been dismissive moments before, now fixed on her with an intensity that stole the air from her lungs. He didn't look at the portrait. He didn't need to. He knew exactly which one she meant. His gaze held hers, searching, probing, assessing. The silence that followed was no longer just heavy. It was sharp, dangerous, filled with everything he refused to say. Aaliyah stood her ground, her heart hammering against her ribs, but she did not look away. She had asked the question, and the world had not ended, but it had tilted on its axis. He had seen something in her face, the resemblance, perhaps, that he had overlooked or dismissed until now. The line of her jaw, the shape of her eyes, the quiet strength that her father had also possessed. Finally, he leaned back in his leather chair, the soft groan of it unnervingly loud in the quiet room. His long fingers steepled before him. The powerful Japanese mafia boss did not seem angry. He seemed disarmed. Thrown into a past he had carefully framed and mounted on his wall, a past he never expected to have to explain. "Your father," he said, his voice a low rumble, the words precise and measured. His name was David. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact that confirmed everything. He knew. He had always known who she was. "You are his daughter," he continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "I wondered if you would ever ask." He didn't offer an explanation. He didn't satisfy the burning curiosity that had led her to this precipice. Instead, he simply acknowledged the truth, leaving the far heavier questions unanswered. He picked up a pen from his desk, a clear dismissal. "That is all for tonight. You may go," she had her answer, and yet she had nothing at all. As she walked out of the room, she could feel his eyes on her back, and she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that nothing would ever be the same again. The next day, the air in the penthouse was thick with a new kind of tension. It was no longer the impersonal silence of a powerful man at work, but a deeply personal, watchful quiet. Aaliyah felt it the moment she stepped through the door. Mr. Tanaka was standing by the vast window, looking out at the sprawling city below, a dark silhouette against the morning light. He did not turn when she entered, but she knew he was aware of her every move as she prepared his morning tea. She set the tray on the low table beside his armchair, her movements careful and deliberate. She would not show fear. Her father had taught her that dignity was something you carried inside you, something no one could take away. He was a man of his word, Mr. Tanaka said, his voice startling her. He still hadn't turned around. "Your father. In my world, that is a rarer currency than gold." Aaliyah remained silent, waiting. This was his story to tell on his terms. "He was a mechanic," she offered softly, needing to ground the conversation in her own reality of the man. "He fixed cars." He had grease under his fingernails that never came out. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Mr. Tanaka's lips as he finally turned to face her. "He fixed more than cars. He fixed problems. Sometimes, he fixed my problems." He walked over to his desk, his eyes lingering on the portrait for a moment before settling back on her. "He worked for me, not in the way my other men work for me. He was not a man of violence. He was a man of integrity. He was my driver, my mechanic, and, on occasion, my conscience." The idea was staggering. Her father, the gentle man who read her bedtime stories and taught her how to change a tire, working for a notorious Japanese mafia boss. It felt like a betrayal of the man she knew, yet Mr. Tanaka spoke of him with a reverence that resonated with her own memory. He saw the conflict in her eyes. "Your father did not approve of my business," he said plainly. "He made that very clear. But he understood that honor is not about the company you keep, but the promises you fulfill. He gave me his word. And he never broke it." He paused, studying her face again. "You have his eyes. Honest. They do not waver." It wasn't a compliment. It was an observation, a test. He was waiting to see if she would break, if she would run. She simply nodded. "Yes, sir." Her resolve was tested a week later. Mr. Tanaka was in a meeting with 3 grim-faced men in sharp, severe suits. Their voices were low, guttural, the sound of grinding stones. Aaliyah could feel the animosity radiating from them as she entered to serve refreshments. The air was electric with it. One of the men, a thick-set man with a scar that bisected his eyebrow, watched her with open contempt as she placed a glass before him. His eyes roamed over her, dismissive and insulting. Aaliyah ignored him, her expression placid, her movements fluid and professional. She had served rude men before, but this was different. This was a challenge directed not at her, but at the man she worked for. A test of his control. As she turned to leave, the man spoke, his voice slick with malice. "Tanaka-san, you keep interesting company. Does the help now listen to our private affairs?" Mr. Tanaka's face remained impassive, but a dangerous coldness entered his eyes. He did not look at the man. He looked at Aaliyah. He was watching her, waiting to see how she would react to being used as a pawn in their power play. Aaliyah stopped. She turned back slowly, her gaze meeting the scarred man's without fear. She gave a slight, formal bow. "My apologies if my presence is a disturbance," she said, her voice calm and even. "I will be sure to be quicker next time." There was no tremor in her voice, no hint of fear or anger. Just quiet, unshakable dignity. She held his gaze for a moment longer before turning and walking out of the room, her back straight. The scarred man let out a short, ugly laugh, but it died in his throat as Mr. Tanaka finally spoke, his voice soft as silk but sharp as a razor. "She has more honor in her little finger, Ito-san, than you have in your entire organization." The meeting ended shortly after. The men left, their faces thunderous. When Aaliyah returned to clear the glasses, Mr. Tanaka was standing by the desk, looking at the portrait of her father. "David would have been proud of you today," he said quietly. "You did not flinch." He then told her a little more of the story. "There was a debt between us. A life debt. He saved me from men like that once. He pulled me from a burning car. He did it not for money, but because it was the right thing to do. That portrait, it is a reminder of that debt. He was beginning to trust her, not just as an employee, but as the daughter of the only man he ever truly respected." The story was unfolding in pieces, small fragments of a past she never knew existed. Each piece he gave her felt like a precious, dangerous gift. She learned to listen, to watch, to understand the currents of power that flowed through that silent office. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a witness. A quiet observer in a world of unspoken rules and lethal consequences. It's a strange thing, isn't it? How a single picture on a wall can change the entire direction of your life. How a question you were terrified to ask becomes the key to unlocking everything you thought you knew. I wonder, if you were in her shoes, would you have asked the question? Or would you have let the ghost on the wall remain a mystery? Let me know what you think. The trust between them deepened not through grand confessions, but through the steady rhythm of their shared days. He started leaving important documents on his desk when she was in the room, an unspoken sign that he no longer considered her a potential threat. He would ask her opinion on small, non-business matters, the choice of a new painting for the lobby, the quality of a particular brand of tea. They were trivial things, but they were bridges being built across the vast chasm of their different worlds. One rainy afternoon, as she was polishing the silver, he spoke without preamble. "He talked about you all the time," Mr. Tanaka said, his gaze distant, fixed on the rain-streaked window. "He was so proud. He said you had a mind for numbers, that you were going to go to college and be an accountant. He was saving for it." Aaliyah's hand stilled. Her father had always encouraged her studies, but he'd been vague about the money, simply telling her not to worry. Now she understood. The generous salary she was earning here, from this Japanese mafia boss, was in a way the final gift from her father, a debt being paid. "He made me promise," Mr. Tanaka continued, turning to look at her, his eyes holding a profound sincerity. "He knew the risks of being near me. He made me swear that if anything ever happened to him, I would ensure you were taken care of, that you would have your chance." This was the heart of it. This wasn't just a job. It was the fulfillment of a sacred vow. The fragile peace of their arrangement was shattered by the ringing of a telephone. It was a private line, one Aaliyah had never heard ring before. Mr. Tanaka answered it, his posture stiffening as he listened. His face, usually a mask of calm, became tight with a controlled fury. He spoke in rapid, clipped Japanese, but Aaliyah didn't need to understand the words to know their meaning. The danger they had spoken of in abstract terms had just become terrifyingly real. When he hung up, he looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something akin to fear in his eyes. Not for himself, but for her. "Ito is making his move," he said, his voice grim. "He's grown bold. He believes I am weak." He walked to a hidden panel in the wall, opening it to reveal a safe. From it, he removed a thick envelope and a small, heavy pistol. He placed the pistol on his desk and pushed the envelope toward her. "This is everything I owe you and more. Enough to go anywhere you want, to start a new life. You must leave now. My driver will take you to the train station. You cannot be here when they come." The message was clear. The war was starting, and his office was about to become the battlefield. He was giving her an escape, severing the tie that bound them, fulfilling the final part of his promise to her father, to keep her safe. He was pushing her out of his world, back into the one where she belonged, away from the violence that was his shadow. For a moment, Aaliyah just stared at the envelope, a passport to a normal life, a life free of fear and secrets. It was everything she could have ever wanted. But as she looked from the money to the hard, lonely look on Mr. Tanaka's face, she knew she couldn't take it. Her father had been a man of his word, and she was her father's daughter. This was not just his fight anymore. Aaliyah looked at the envelope filled with money, then back at the man who had, against all odds, become her protector. She saw the weight of his world pressing down on him, the profound loneliness of a man who commanded an army but had no one to stand beside him. In that moment, Her choice became startlingly clear. She gently pushed the envelope back across the desk toward him. "No," she said, her voice soft but firm. "My father didn't run from a fight when he saw a man in a burning car. I'm not running either." Mr. Tanaka stared at her, his expression a mixture of disbelief and something else, something deeper. He had offered her freedom, a clean break, and she had refused it. She had chosen to stand with him, a powerful Japanese mafia boss on the brink of a war. "You do not understand," he said, his voice low and urgent. "These are not honorable men. They will not hesitate. Your presence here puts you in grave danger." "I understand perfectly," she replied, her gaze steady. "You have a debt to my father. But he had a debt to you, too. The debt of a friend. He wouldn't have left you to face this alone. Neither will I." Her loyalty was no longer a transaction, no longer about a promise made over a man's memory. It was about the man standing before her. She had seen his code of honor, his quiet integrity, the hidden kindness beneath the hardened exterior. She was choosing to stay not out of obligation, but out of a fierce, protective loyalty that had taken root in her own heart. A slow, profound change washed over Mr. Tanaka's face. The hardened lines seemed to soften. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw not just the ghost of his friend, but a woman of immense courage and strength. He gave a slow, solemn nod. "Very well," he said. "Then stay. But you'll do exactly as I say." He picked up the pistol from the desk, his movements calm and purposeful once more. He was no longer a man preparing to face his enemies alone. He had an ally, an unlikely, unexpected, and profoundly loyal ally. The attack came not with a bang, but with a quiet, chilling efficiency. The power to the penthouse was cut, plunging the opulent office into the gloomy twilight of the storm-darkened city. The emergency lights flickered on, casting long, dancing shadows. Mr. Tanaka was instantly on his feet, moving with a predator's grace to the side of the door, pistol in hand. "Stay away from the windows," he commanded in a low voice. "Go to the back wall, behind the desk. Stay down." Aaliyah's heart was a frantic drum against her ribs, but her mind was clear. She did as he said, crouching behind the massive mahogany desk, the scent of its wood polish a strange comfort in the terrifying silence. They could hear them now, the soft thud of footsteps in the outer office, the quiet click of a door being opened. There were several of them. Mr. Tanaka remained perfectly still, a statue of deadly patience. He was waiting for them to make the first move, to reveal their position. It was then that Aaliyah noticed something. In the dim emergency light, she saw a faint reflection on the polished surface of a glass-cased bookshelf across the room. It was a distorted, moving shadow, the shape of a man, not at the main door where Mr. Tanaka was waiting, but at the service entrance, near the small kitchenette. They were flanking him. He would be caught in a crossfire. "The service door," she whispered, her voice tight with urgency. "To your left." "There's one there." Mr. Tanaka didn't question her. He didn't even turn his head. He trusted her. In one fluid motion, he spun and fired 2 shots into the wall beside the kitchenette door. A strangled cry and the heavy thud of a body followed. The element of surprise was shattered. The men at the main entrance opened fire, bullets splintering the doorframe. But their advantage was gone. Mr. Tanaka was already moving, using the heavy furniture as cover, returning fire with disciplined precision. The fight was short, brutal, and decisive. When it was over, a profound silence descended once more, broken only by the sound of their own ragged breathing. He had won, but he hadn't won alone. Her quick eyes and quiet voice had saved his life, just as her father's hands had done years ago. In the aftermath, the office was a wreck of splintered wood, shattered glass, and the acrid smell of gunfire. The bodies of Ito's men had been removed by Mr. Tanaka's own silent, efficient crew, leaving only the scars of the battle behind. The city lights twinkled outside the window, oblivious. The storm had passed. Mr. Tanaka stood by that window, his back to her, the pistol now resting on his desk. The adrenaline had faded, leaving a heavy, bone-deep weariness in its place. Aaliyah began to quietly clean up some of the debris, her practical, steady actions a balm in the charged atmosphere. She picked up a fallen book, its cover torn, and placed it back on a shelf. He finally turned to face her. The emotional armor he wore so constantly was gone, stripped away by the violence and by her unwavering loyalty. His eyes held a raw vulnerability she had never seen before. "He made me promise to protect you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Tonight, you protected me." He crossed the room and stood before her, so close she could see the exhaustion etched around his eyes. "The debt is paid, Aaliyah. You are free to go. I will give you anything you want. A new life, school, a house far away from all of this. It is yours." He was offering her the world, a world away from him. But looking at him, she knew that a world without him in it was no longer the world she wanted. She shook her head softly. "I don't want to go," she whispered. He reached out, his hand hesitating for a moment before he gently tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was warm, surprisingly tender. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Why would you choose to stay in this world?" She met his gaze, her heart in her eyes. "Because you're in it," she said simply. The truth of it hung between them, pure and undeniable. It wasn't about her father anymore. It wasn't about a debt. It was about them. The hardened Japanese mafia boss and the quiet waitress who had seen the honorable man beneath the fearsome reputation. In that moment, he leaned down and pressed a gentle, reverent kiss to her forehead. It was not a kiss of passion, but of gratitude, of devotion. A promise. The office was slowly put back together. The splintered door was replaced, the bullet holes in the wall were plastered and painted over, but the room itself was irrevocably changed. It was no longer just his space, it was theirs. Aaliyah still prepared his tea, but now she would often sit with him while he drank it, sharing a comfortable silence that spoke more than words ever could. The portrait of her father and Mr. Tanaka still hung on the wall, but its meaning had transformed. It was no longer a symbol of a mysterious past or an unpaid debt. It was a foundation. It was the story of how two different worlds had collided, brought together by an act of honor, and how that legacy of integrity had been passed down from a father to his daughter. One evening, as they stood before it, he took her hand, his fingers lacing through hers. "Your father was the best man I ever knew," he said quietly. "He believed people could be better than their circumstances. He saw good in a man like me." Aaliyah leaned her head against his shoulder. "He was a good judge of character." Their relationship was not one of grand romantic declarations. It was built on quieter, stronger things, mutual respect, unshakable trust, and a deep, abiding loyalty. She became his confidant, the calm center in his violent world. He, in turn, was her fierce protector, the guardian of her future. He funded her college education, not as a payment, but as an investment in her dreams. She didn't become an accountant. She studied business, law, strategy. She was learning his world, not to partake in its darkness, but to help him navigate it with the same integrity her father had shown. She was his partner, in every sense of the word that mattered. Home, she realized, was not a place. It was the quiet safety you built with another person, a sanctuary forged in trust and sealed with devotion. And in the most unlikely of places, in the penthouse office of a powerful Japanese mafia boss, beside a ghost in a golden frame, Aaliyah had finally found hers.